If there's one thing about the creative process that I always find incredible, it's how some of the most beautiful artistic creations come so effortlessly and so quickly. This is one of my favourite albums from the past 25 years. It's just 11 amazing songs, less than 35 minutes long, and it was written nearly entirely by Amy, with just 2 producers enabling her creative process. This easily could have been made with countless co-writers and producers on it, and it wouldn't sound nearly as good. But if making a great album is this simple, why doesn't everyone make something so good? What we see as Amy's effortless process was actually something far more difficult for her. What we would call Amy's style wasn't so much her style, it was who she was. From a young age, she was inspired by incredible singers such as Sarah Vaughan, Dinah Washington and Billie Holiday. You can hear it in her phrasing and the way she'd bend and hold a note, but perhaps most importantly just the honesty and pureness in her singing. Jazz music was Amy's life. Many of her family members were jazz musicians. Her grandmother even dated Ronnie Scott. Amy only released 2 albums, Frank and then Back to Black, before she tragically died in 2011. It's quite interesting to compare these 2 albums. Although Back to Black is more well known, they aren't too different in terms of Amy's creative process. Amy was never just a singer where you can put some songs in front of her to sing. She lived and experienced the music that she played. I think many people would think of Amy Winehouse as a jazz singer, and yeah, of course she was. But she was more than that. She was a rock star. She was funny, she was unashamedly herself, she wrote her own songs, and she was brutally honest against any form of authority. And all of her music reflected this attitude.
I guess people know that I don't really do what I'm told to do, or that I don't really care enough about what people think of me to conform to anything.
Another part of what gave Amy this rock star life was that she was so creative, so original and so hardworking. She didn't come to fame through a TV show or anything. Her early years were spent writing songs and playing jazz gigs around London. With Frank, we can hear a lot of these positive influences, the optimism of her late teenage years, and although it wasn't a massive commercial success, it did at least put her on the map. Back to Black, however, is a much darker album. In this way, it's very different, but the way she gives us an insight into her process is actually very similar. Different artists have different ways of writing. Some start with the lyrics, some start with the music, or someone like Stevie Wonder would just write a song every day. Amy's process was a bit different. Rather than forcing an idea or writing for the sake of it, Amy wasn't afraid to spend some time away from writing, and then when the moment was right, these amazing songs would just come so effortlessly.
I know the reason it took me 3 years to write another, not to write it, but to get that big chunk of my life that I could then go back and write about. The reason it took me that long is because I had to, have some peaks and troughs, definitely.
And this is what happened with Back to Black. She spent 2 or 3 years just living her life, and then when she was ready for a new album, she would just write about her life. And this leads to the question, what happened that meant the time was right for new music? It all started with her moving to Camden, an area in North London, an area full of bars, pubs, music and culture. It's still down to earth, it's not the most fancy area of London, it's actually pretty normal, but it has a great cultural vibe. Amy spent a lot of time in Camden, hanging out in pubs, playing pool, and listening to a lot of jukebox music, especially the girl groups of the 60s. This was also where she met Blake Fielder Civil, her on then off again boyfriend, then later husband, who she clearly fell so deeply in love with. It wasn't the best relationship, in fact it was likely very toxic and ultimately destructive, and the themes of love and heartbreak on Back to Black are all about what she experienced in this relationship. And this all led to the most tragic part of her life, which was her deepening experience with heavy drinking and drug use. It's no surprise that a young, newly famous and somewhat wealthy pop star would be partying, but it was Blake that likely introduced her to harder drugs, and given how deeply in love she was with him, Amy was more susceptible to being influenced, and as Blake was already an addict, he likely saw Amy as an avenue for more drugs. This was Amy's life. It's really sad to think about, this rising star with incredible talent taken into this difficult life. But that's how it was, and now it was time for Amy to start writing again.
For you I was a flame, Love is a losing game.
Amy began Back to Black by returning to Miami to work with producer Salaam Remi, who she worked with on Frank. They worked together on 5 new songs: Tears Dry on Their Own, Some Unholy War, Me and Mr. Jones, Just Friends, and Wake Up Alone. But the early demos were all in this kind of jazzy bossa nova style that she was already familiar with.
All I can ever video is the darkness we once knew.
By now, she had in her mind that she wanted the new album to sound more like the 60s Motown music she was listening to in Camden. Amy's willingness to work quickly and intimately was soon apparent. She walked into Salaam's studio and wanted to get to work immediately.
She's like, can I record my vocals right here? So pretty much this became it. We took this mic, placed it here, and this was the recording of Back to Black.
This way of recording led to a real honesty and rawness in the music. Before recording the song Me and Mr. Jones, she started making a cup of tea, but when the kettle went off during recording, she just left it in.
I might let you make it up to me.
Tea kettle.
Who's playing Saturday?
Salaam also helped to move the process along quickly by playing many of the instruments on these tracks. It's a great example of the producer working with Amy, working around her style, and just enabling her to bring out her best. Not trying to shape her into something else or trying to force something to happen, but just giving her space to work as she wanted and allowing the music to happen. Together they arranged and recorded these 5 songs in just 10 days. Everything happened so quickly. Amy wasn't searching for perfection, or actually it's more accurate to say that she realised the perfection came from capturing the honesty in her voice. And as we all know, the more you try and overwork something, the more you start to lose that magic. Amy and Salaam worked well together, but it was also clear that she was looking to experiment with a new style. And soon after, she was first introduced to Mark Ronson. From the very first moment, Mark and Amy hit it off.
She was instantly just so cool. I liked her in the first 5 minutes. I just asked her what kind of record that she wanted to make. And she said, well, I have these songs, but I love all this music that they played down at my local.
Mark began by asking what kind of music Amy was listening to, and she mentioned these girl groups of the 60s. And that very first night, Mark went away and began writing Back to Black.
I was just inspired, and I don't know why. I just went and sat in the piano. The Back to Black chords just sort of came out.
Amy heard the song, loved it, and in no time at all went away to write some lyrics. Again, just this incredible process of Mark writing something on the first night, and Amy coming up with lyrics in the moment. No committee meeting, no team of people tweaking and changing things around, just pure creativity. At one point, Mark asked Amy if she would rewrite the lyrics to the chorus on Back to Black because it didn't rhyme, but she immediately dismissed it because why would she change something that just naturally came out? A similar thing happened with the song Rehab, where it just came from the story that Amy was telling Mark.
She said it was really bad. She was drinking all the time, and they tried to make me go to rehab, and I was like, no, no, no. It just instantly struck. It was such a hook, and the way that she said it was had such a cadence.
I think if they had given any thought as to whether it was a good idea, they probably would have talked themselves out of it. But they didn't. They just got on with it, and the song became this incredible hit. Nearly all of the songs on this album were written by just Amy, and the production was handled by just Mark and Salaam. The production on this album is exactly what production should be. Amy came along with this vision, this idea, and the producers did their job of just bringing that to life, and nothing else. They didn't get in the way of Amy, they just allowed the music to exist, all from this heartbreaking life she'd been living for the past few years.
I just met her just at the moment where she decided she wanted to kind of be clean and just get it going. That's why I couldn't relate or understand what everyone else was saying about this troubled, artist.
And Amy just wrote and sang so effortlessly but so honestly. There are times in the creative process where you need to rework something again and again, constantly refining until you make something perfect. But there are also times where you just want to capture something so magical, so honest. And that's what Amy understood so well. She didn't allow herself to get in the way of her own process. Back to Black was her second and final album, and sadly in the years following its release, her drinking and drug use continued to get worse. With everything I've just said, you might think that her music might actually get better, and she did plan to release some new music, but we never got to hear it. Amy died in 2011, aged just 27, placing her in a club alongside other young musicians who died from drug and alcohol abuse at the same age. Many people remember this lifestyle as her legacy as a musician, but Amy's legacy should be her honesty, the love of music, and this incredible ability to communicate this difficulty in her life. It's why these albums wouldn't have worked if the producers started trying to force some other ideas. I travel through Camden most days when working on these videos, and I've been listening to her music a lot, and you can feel the spirit in the music as you pass through the places that inspired her. It's easy to romanticize such a difficult life, but I think it's also worth remembering the purpose of the creative process isn't always to force an idea, but sometimes to just allow something to happen.